taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Augmented Reality podcast for March 28th, 2020. This is your source for news, leaks, and insights about games in the gaming industry. The Saturday edition of the show. My name is Ash, and I'm here as always with Obsidian. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. It is day, can't even remember now, of quarantining stuff and isolation, and I think everybody's starting to feel it a little bit. So
It's it's a little tough, but we're gonna push through, and we're glad to see all of the ways that our community is sort of getting together and helping each other out, coming up with things to do. It's great, and lots of time for gaming if you are into that, which I imagine most of you are, considering you're listening to this podcast. And we are going to be talking a lot about games today, video games and other games. Mostly video games today. But if you are listening live, please say hello in the live chat. Send us your questions and comments there as well. We'll read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. And don't forget to slam that like button. It likes it rough, and it tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. If you're listening after the fact on one of the audio-only platforms, we're glad you're here as well. We appreciate your likes and follows there. It does take us a bit of time to get the podcast up to those audio platforms, so if you want to get the latest info sooner, we encourage you to hit the link in the description to subscribe to the Triple S League YouTube channel. Some interesting stories today. We've got a story about AMD being held hostage by some kind of a hacker, scammer person. Epic Games is moving into publishing. The Fallout 76 Wastelanders DLC has been delayed again, and I don't know how much interest there is among our audience in Fallout 76 anymore, but this was the update that's sort of supposed to remake the game into what it should have been from the beginning. So we're going to talk about that a bit, but also the headline story today. There's some evidence that BioWare might be working on another Mass Effect title, and that whatever they're working on is a multiplayer title. So if that turns out to be a Mass Effect multiplayer game, that's some interesting news, and not necessarily interesting in a good way, but we'll dive into that. But anyway, hello to everybody who is busy talking in the live chat. It's great to see you all. All right. So let's start with this AMD thing, just because it's kind of a smaller story, more of just a kind of industry.
It's also weird. It sounds like the plot of a movie, because this is literally like, so they had
like an Austin
steal,
Powers movie.
They had somebody steal a ton of their info, which was like research and R&D stuff and a bunch of other like general concepts and stuff. Then they posted a huge chunk of it online to on some torrenting sites, and
the
whatever.
hacker did, yeah.
And then he's like, "Hey, give me money or I'll, post the rest of this." So they're working with law enforcement trying to track this down, and of course it's highly illegal, and I don't know why he's stupid enough to try and do this, but yeah, it's shocking.
Yeah,
how
so
stuff kind of works sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in a statement on its website, AMD said it was contacted in December of 2019 by an individual who claimed to have accessed some test files that they basically accessed from a company server, that they accessed via some exploits, and they were posted on GitHub before AMD took them down with a DMCA notice. AMD is basically trying to downplay this whole thing, saying, we believe the stolen graphics IP is not core to the competitiveness or security of our graphics products. The company went on to say it has no reason to believe that the hacker has any other AMD tech in their control at this time. And Torrent Freak reports that the hacker stole graphics code related to AMD's Navi and Arden GPUs. The Arden GPU is said to be the code name for the 12 teraflop Xbox Series X GPU. So this might be the new Xbox graphics processor that this code relates to. But anyway, the hacker is asking a ransom of $100 million.
Yeah.
Which is why I say, this sounds like the plot of an Austin Powers movie. $100 million. I mean, that's just insane. It's like they either figure that, I mean, $100 million for that, it seems like overkill. Seems like you're really pricing yourself out of the market there. And yeah, of course, if they don't get the code or if they don't get the money, they'll just leak everything. But hopefully law enforcement tracks this scumbag down and deals with him appropriately.
Yeah. This is not the first time we've seen this, essentially kidnapping data and then threatening to release it is actually kind of it's an increasingly common thing.
Yeah.
Strangely enough.
This happened to CD Projekt Red a couple years ago.
Yep. Yeah, with a lot of their original info about Cyberpunk before it went through its refit, basically. So,
yeah, it wasn't terribly new. It wasn't terribly groundbreaking info, but yeah, they basically at that point their response was, the info might be out there, so don't look for it if you don't want spoilers. They're kind of like, screw these people, which is, I don't know, in a lot of cases is probably the right response. In the case of AMD, I mean, you might not want, if it's like proprietary code or something like that, you don't want it necessarily out there, but they are downplaying it, saying, this is not that important. Who knows if that's true or not, but that's the story. So anyway, some interesting goings-on in the industry. Speaking of interesting goings-on in the industry, let's talk about Epic quickly here. So they are moving into a publishing role, and it's starting off with 3 developers: Gen Design, the developer of The Last Guardian; Playdead, who did Inside and Limbo, both very excellent games; and Remedy Entertainment, who developed Control. And they are putting forward this publishing wing and saying it's a developer-first approach publishing agreement, which seems to be kind of their calling card. Developer-first. Gamers, well, maybe if we have time, we'll get around to putting a shopping cart in our store. Which, do they even have that yet? Like, I programmed a shopping cart in I think it was my first semester of web development, maybe my second. I don't get what's so complicated about it.
I really don't understand. They have bought out games that have have a shopping cart within their little store
inside the game, yeah.
But for some reason, and this is the stupid thing, if still, and we have to send this out as a warning, if you buy 6 to 10 games in the span of an hour on their website, you will most likely be marked as having a stolen credit card, because nobody has a system in which people are forced to buy a single purchase, often of the same cost or around the same cost, over and over and over again in short succession. That triggers all basically all credit card safety features, saying, hey, looks like this card's stolen. We see some really suspicious purchases on here. They're buying 10 things at this, one after the other. I mean, obviously the card's been stolen, because no sane person would spend money on a website 10 times in a row for the exact same price. You just don't do that. Well, except for Epic, of course,
Yeah.
which is hilarious.
So
Um,
yeah,
and
exactly.
then the funny thing is I mean, there's been some horror stories with this because then the next time that they go to use the card, it's reported as stolen, and then all purchases are revoked and canceled. And so it's like, great, now you've just wasted my day, and my essentially like the next 2 weeks as you wait for a new card, and as you have to go through the whole rigmarole of contacting the bank or the credit card company and telling them this. It's like, could they possibly screw this up anymore? And the answer to that is apparently no. Apparently they're just happy with the continual screw up that is their stupid game. So it's
There.
like,
Yeah, I can't believe they still haven't. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong if they've added that shopping cart since, but I mean, I don't use the Epic Game Store on a regular basis, but I haven't heard anything about a shopping cart
yeah,
being added in. But I mean, it was kind of ridiculous. You'd think that's a day one feature. You're selling multiple games. People might want to buy more than one game. Put in a freaking shopping cart. But anyway, their publishing wing hopefully will be a little better in terms of how it works. And I mean, it sounds like they're offering actually a pretty good deal. So they're basically they've outlined three key features of the publishing deals that they're offering to developers. Full creative freedom and ownership, so developers retain all of the intellectual property rights and have full creative control of their work. This is good. This is really good. We've praised Microsoft for doing something similar, really letting developers retain creative control while providing funding, which is the next step here. Epic Games Publishing will cover 100% of development costs, or up to 100%, and including expenses like QA, localization, marketing, and all that kind of a thing. And then they have a 50-50 profit sharing deal. Once costs are recouped by Epic's publishing, developers will earn at least 50% of the profits. So you might have to. I don't have a point of reference for that. What is a typical profit sharing arrangement in a publishing arrangement like this?
it's. I mean, it really depends, but the industry has been kind of really wonky on this lately. Um, there is some cases in which, like, say Activision, for example, where essentially the developer makes, like, they don't really make anything. They just keep getting a monthly budget by the publisher. So in a lot of these scenarios, it's like the publisher just like it's like you're owned by the publisher, and then everything that you're working on is basically just a continual job for them. So
Right. Yeah.
in the case of like Blizzard owning or being owned by Activision, um, Blizzard essentially doesn't really make any money at all now. They're just handed a budget by Activision. Um,
Right. They're
so in
essentially
some
employed.
yeah,
Yeah.
so in some cases you could technically argue, and you really can for Blizzard, and it's just a big example, so that's why I bring it up. Um, Basically, the entity that is Blizzard doesn't is no longer exists because they don't get a separate account with money. They can't buy themselves out like you know Destiny Bungie did. Bungie bought themselves out to try and like so that they could run their own game and be their own owners again. But you don't really have this in a lot of these other cases, and this is where just publishing has been heading. So just more and more, that's the generalized situation. Is like, oh yeah, we'll take care of all your needs and financial issues, but then we own you,
Right.
lock, stock, and barrel. You don't get the ability to do or trade or sell or do anything. Period. that's just life. And I mean, with EA, they cancel studios. The studios don't have a say in what happens. They 100% owned and controlled by this, basically a mega corporation. Um, so yeah, in a lot of examples, it's not really even a valid question anymore. So I do kind of have to give it to them, at the least a little bit, that they're trying apparently. So
Yeah, on the surface, this looks fantastic. On the
mhm.
surface, this looks really great. I'd be curious to know what a comparable deal might look like for a publisher like Devolver, who publishes a lot of indie games. I'm curious to know what that kind of a deal looks like, what kind of profit sharing they offer. Um, if anybody out there knows, I mean, let me know. But on the surface, this does look really good, especially the full creative freedom and ownership thing. Now, in Microsoft's case, Microsoft, is buying these studios like Obsidian. They own fully and outright, but they are. I don't know about the intellectual property ownership, but they're definitely they're definitely leaning toward that whole full creative control thing, saying, okay, you make the game you want to make, we provide the funding, everybody wins because you know how to make good games. We're not gonna come and muck it up with our corporate nonsense. And so as long as they stick to that, that'll be really really good. And so yeah, on the whole, I mean, this looks decent. Now, do you think could there be anything lurking that might cause problems down the road, Cyber? Do you think this is going to work out really well and this is going to be a really good? It's a great business move. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, Epic does seem to be, if they know how to do anything, it's diversify their income streams.
Mhm.
So we'll have to see how it goes. And they've signed deals with some pretty good some pretty good devs. Remedy Entertainment, of course, the makers of Control. That was a very critically acclaimed game. Unfortunately, was an Epic exclusive. Oh, that's the other thing. There's no mention of being an exclusive on the Epic Games Store being a requirement of the publishing deal. Now,
Yeah,
will that emerge down the road? I mean,
if if history is any educator, because again, Tim's constantly said, "Oh, hey, hey guys, we're not going to be doing this anymore," and then they do it again, and like, "Oh, hey, no, seriously, we're not going to do this anymore," and then they do it again, and they're like, when they're pressed on it, it's like, "Well, really, we really feel that, blah 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 blah," blah. And it's like, okay, you kill it, you like really. You can't be, can't take the time to do anything. Um, and yeah, it's just hurting their business,
yeah,
uh, as far as like just how people perceive it to be. So it's yeah. I would be very surprised if we don't end up hearing some more of these similar stories of like, well, they promised all of this and that, and then they just made it really difficult for us to publish our game onto Steam. Like it was just extremely difficult.
hmm.
So yeah.
All right. So let's talk about BioWare and what they're doing. Um,
Um.
yeah, so there was a job posting on there's a job posting from EA, the owner of BioWare. And, speaking of publishers owning developers and wringing the life out of them, there's a job opening there for a senior engineering lead for the next major title in one of BioWare's most prestigious franchises. That's a quote from the actual job posting. And they're looking for somebody to partner with the other disciplines, build technology, and the programming team to deliver an amazing player experiences. And they want somebody who has shipped multiple video game titles and hang on, that's not the quote I'm looking for. Basically, they want somebody who has experience developing, debugging, and optimizing AAA multiplayer games on PC or console. So they specifically are looking for someone with that experience in the multiplayer, and they want to put this person on a team to work on a game for one of their most prestigious franchises. Now, we know they've got another Dragon Age game in development, but so how do we know that this is not a position they're looking for this Dragon Age game, Simon? But what's to lead us to believe that this is talking about a different franchise, one of their most prestigious franchises, probably Mass Effect? Like what leads us to that conclusion?
Well, because while they say our most prestigious franchises, basically this narrows it down to Dragon Age and Mass Effect. It does not include any of their other games because none of their other games are quote unquote prestigious anymore. Not really, and for a lot of them, they don't have the rights to reproduce. So Neverwinter Nights, they don't have the rights to that. Baldur's Gate, they don't have the rights to that. They can't do any work on Jade Empire because they don't. They have some writing issues there. So basically, yeah, we. So they have Mass Effect and Dragon Age, and that's it.
Right.
Now they might have they might include Anthem into that if they're insane and completely stupid.
That would be, yeah, that would be a stretch. One of our
Yeah.
and Anthem's not a franchise really yet either. Like, it's a game that I think they were planning to build a franchise off of, but it's certainly not at that stage. It's definitely not prestigious. So unless they're just kind of using that to rope people in with the kind of terminology, yeah, it's probably not Anthem. But how do we know they're not talking about the upcoming, the Dragon Age game that we know they have in development?
We know that it's not that essentially because the game is like really close to being done, and we know that from numerous leaks and numerous information being put out that essentially the game really has been designed around multiplayer from the ground up, and that this has been a part of its development all this time. You wouldn't be hiring somebody to fill this position in a game that's been designed around multiplayer for all these years into development, and the game is coming up to release. You just wouldn't really hire somebody for that. They might be hiring for somebody for like post release content updates. That is possible, but again, you wouldn't really be looking to bring somebody from outside the company in to handle that because they don't know the game, they don't know the lore, they don't know hardly anything. They would need to do a lot of catching up in order to actually make this new position work. Um, you'd probably just prefer to like take somebody who's currently in the system and kind of upgrade them. That's not to say that that's a for sure no. It is still possible that this is a Dragon Age related position, but just that with the timing, they're headed into they're wrapping up work on Dragon Age essentially, sort of, and a lot of their team members are now moving over full time into working on the next Mass Effect game, and we know that we know that Mass Effect is the next game because Casey's made that quite clear. And again, unless they're like, we know that they've essentially abandoned work on Anthem as far as the Edmonton studio goes. There's a small team working on it that's apparently trying to do a complete relaunch, which I mean, good luck. but their team is really small, and they're all handling that out of Austin. Um, so yeah, that's about it. Um, they could be working on another. It could be a SWOTOR thing. It could be a Star Wars thing. That is possible, um, but again, that was mostly developed in the Austin studio. It really wasn't developed in the Canadian Edmonton studio. So the rumors on this one, I think, are leaning towards it being Mass Effect. I think is the most probably the most accurate thing I can think of right now. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's really what's been leading me to think this. Now I've been speaking with some people, and I've been doing some digging. They are for sure working on the Mass Effect game. That's not inside info. We know that we know that Casey basically said, yeah, we're going back, we're doing this. This is our next thing. It is kind of more or less his baby now, and he would be the primary person responsible for working on it going forward, or for directing it going forward as a whole. So the entire franchise of Mass Effect is essentially in his hands, and he has the ability to do whatever he wants with it. Um, I would find that like probably his number one goal right now is to get that game back up and running and respectable again, because this is something that he's worked on. Now, as pointed out even earlier in the chat here, um, Casey was one of the people responsible for that horrendous decision to do the three color ending, and he was one of the people who took the heat for that. Now, hopefully, he's learned and he's grown as an individual. He's learned that, you know, his concept of a surprise ending is pretty terrible. It's pretty butt, um, and it's not, and he's not good at that as a writer and creator. Or that he's learned to get past that and write something that's a little bit more interesting, other than an ending that's essentially cinematically is basically the same. No, Robin Green, I totally meant to do that phrasing. So yeah, so Casey, basically we know that he's really wanting to do this. Um, the the trouble that I've been hearing is that I have not heard of them bringing on any writers, um, which has me very concerned, because as far as we know, when all their good writers left the company, um, they didn't, like, everything that they had in the universe of Mass Effect was like basically like used up. Um, they had never really thought about the Milky Way past essentially the end of the movie. To them, the whole thing was done. That's how they wrote it, which is why Andromeda took place in a completely different galaxy. Because the Milky Way story was this trilogy, and that was it. And initially, the writers are like, "We're gonna do this. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be a single story, and then that's it. That's all there's going to be to this story. Done."
Right.
I like we all know where that went and why that went that way. So what this means is that the studio hadn't really prepared anything to continue on from this. They were anticipating creating a new story, which they had in the whole Anthem thing, and well, I mean that thing fell through. Um, and they didn't really like the original writing on that game was apparently really good, from what I've heard from the inside, and they've only been using like mostly like a sliver of like the basic concept. So a lot of that writing just really fell through. Um, yeah, so
Okay.
that sucked. Yeah, so I mean, as far as my sources go, and as far as I could put everything together, this is definitely a Mass Effect thing.
Okay.
And logically, that marries up. That's what I've been trying to like talk through here. Is like they don't have the only other thing it could be is Star Wars. It's the only other thing. And right now we know that there is a lot of talks going on back and forth between them and Disney, and there's some stuff going on there. Um, Maybe with the recent financial situation that Disney's found themselves in, which is on a scale of one being, oh no, we should probably do something about this, to 10, going like, sound the alarm, Titanic is sinking, sound the alarm, Titanic is sinking. They're at about a 13. So they're in big trouble. They need some kind of a win here, and this isn't something that they can just pop off tomorrow. This is something that they're needing to set for like next year, year after, and year after that. Next 3 years is going to be pivotal for Disney. This year is going to be a total loss, and I think they know that. And I think there are some changes coming in as far as how the studio, or how Disney functions as a whole. They could be saying, all right, EA, whatever you got for Star Wars games, here's the green light, do whatever you want. That could be something that's happened, although we haven't heard rumors about that coming from people who are more connected on the Disney slash EA connection. There's a whole bunch of channels that really have decent connections at actual Disney studio. I don't have that many connections at Disney Studio, so I would think that this would have been heard as a rumor somewhere else first, and I haven't heard diddly squat. So there's a good chance that this is not true, that it's not a Disney Star Wars thing, and that they are going back to basics as far as with the Mass Effect. So yeah, I think that's what's going on.
Okay,
I
but let's talk
really
about that
believe
for a
what
sec.
that.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about going back to the basics with Mass Effect. Let's talk about sort of go outside the box, and I don't know if you have any info that you can share from your contacts at Bioware, but what could we be looking at in terms of a new Mass Effect game? Are we looking at Andromeda 2 or
No, we'd be looking at a rewrite of what's going on in the Milky Way.
okay?
So, so there's a couple places to go with this. Um, you have yourself sort of a setting that is very interesting with the whole like synthetic like dawn, basically, that happened with them with all biomatter and technological matter like intermixing. That is an interesting concept to tell a story in. Although they did make it clear that, oh, over the next 100 years, peace reigned and people were able to communicate and blah. And so that's kind of a, because they said that, um, they would be kind of like shooting themselves in the foot as far as lore goes. But this is a good place to start this criticism, or this looking at this information this way, because in any story writing, they will essentially be doing the same thing. Um, because they've either all of the gates and way of traveling to and from one side of the galaxy to the other has been essentially completely destroyed, or you have everybody working together. So that's not going to work for a Mass Effect story game. You need those. You need the ability to like bring the galaxy together, um, or you're telling a story that's cornered off into one section of the galaxy, and or a single star system. And that could work, but you're going to run into a lot of like story walls and other things. And I don't know if people would really be accepting of that, of like, hey, here's a galaxy, but it was once all connected, but now we're completely shut off from different aspects in different areas. And the story most likely end up taking place in and around the home system, Sol system, because that's currently where the dang Citadel is now residing. So that could work. It could make sense. You could work with that, or you're kind of stuck with this whole like synthetic dawn thing. And between those two, I don't think one right away has the ability to like really grab everybody's interest. Without the mass relays, it doesn't really feel like a Mass Effect game, but there wasn't Mass Effect, or there wasn't mass relays in Andromeda, so maybe not, maybe-ish, but
Well, I
yeah.
guess that's the question. Did Andromeda feel like a Mass Effect game?
Technically, yeah, storyline wise, people really moved away from it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I mean it could work without that. I mean they could also shift the time frame quite a bit.
yeah, they could do a prequel.
Prequel
There
or
has
like a
been
sequel set like way in the future from
a prequel is frankly and sadly more likely, which is not something I like saying. I really don't like saying that. I really, really dislike saying that. Because I don't want prequels. Prequels are so boring because you ultimately know the outcome. And why and there's nothing truly at stake. There's nothing truly at stake. You play humans meeting the Turians for the first time in the Turian War. It's like, what do you know is going to happen? Well, they're going to stop fighting. Okay. Is Earth going to get killed? No. Is the Turian Empire going to get killed? No. Is your like small like little battle group going to die? Maybe. Are you going to be able to like hold a grudge and be like, those darn aliens and their stupid scaly heads with scaly ear thingies, not ear thingies, head thingies. It's like, oh, we hate that. It's like, okay, great. There's not a lot to go there. There's not a lot to build on. It's just a hollow kind of story, and I really hope that they don't do that because it's just terrible.
You'd have to bring the scale down. You'd have to say like focus on a specific smaller story within the context of that world.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have the yeah, you don't really have the ability to go in any direction with it. It's just I was looking notional seas. I was stretching for a joke there, and it just like there's no joke to be made. It's just doing a prequel would just not be interesting.
Mm-hmm. So what about a sequel like what about a sequel set way in the future? Like they could set it because I mean Andromeda was quite far in the future if I recall correctly because of the the travel time to the Andromeda galaxy. Mm-hmm. They could set something that was like concurrent with the Andromeda timeline but happening in the Milky Way. That might be interesting.
Yeah. Well, and they have a ton of abandoned theories as well, and a ton of abandoned stuff. And what I honestly think, what they honestly should do, is they should take some of the best fan theories and build upon that, especially when it comes to the dark matter stuff. Because here's a storyline that was pivotal in 1 and 2 and even going into 3. And then they just dropped it. And they had all this good stuff for it, and they just, no, it's not interesting. You know what is interesting? A 3-color ending. Now that's interesting. A whole like dark energy affecting the fate of the galaxy because of some sinister thing that is a threat to both organic and non-organic life. No, let's not get into that. Let's just walk away from that beautiful concept that really like could go anywhere thing, and let's just do a rehash of the Turian War. I swear, I like. Please stop. No, for. Please stop. No, please, no, stop.
Right. So what about the multiplayer thing? So
So multiplayer has always been kind of like ever since 2, it's been really, really pivotal in the series. 3, it was really decent. There's some people who hated it, and I get that. Some people hated multiplayer, but the multiplayer had promise. And what they should have done with stupid Anthem was turn that into a multiplayer thing. Set it in the middle of like the game 2 or whatever, and just kind of build it off from there. That the game would have been so much more successful if they just did that. Just make it something like pocket story or corner story or something like that. Instead, they're like, no, we're gonna make the Bob Dylan of games. It's gonna be great. Yeah. So yeah, so the concept of them building around multiplayer again, that's totally within the range of what they want to do. In and the way that they phrase it, it's not an MMO, which is what we would see if they were going to do anything with Star Wars. If they're doing anything with Star Wars, it's going to be either an MMO or it's going to be a mass multiplayer type thing, because that's what they feel is going to get them money. So that could be a thing. I mean, it could still be a Star Wars thing, but no, I think that the way that they're going to design this around, the next story is not going to have a Commander Shepard. It's not going to have a singular character with a singular story. I think they're going to make it so that you create your hero, and then your hero is able to do all this stuff with all these other people who are also heroes. This is actually the better way to go as far as like rebuilding faith and trust with the community, is by getting people to become their own heroes of their own stories. I think that's I think that's the most likely scenario here, because what we have is they're going to want to add characters and stuff to it, but as far as the multiplayer goes, they really want to draw people in with that. And drawing people in with that is to make them connect with their character, who is the same character that they bring into the multiplayer is the same character that they're playing in the single player. And this is the big cutoff that you had in the multiplayer, because people were not like they weren't playing their hero. They weren't playing their Commander Shepard. They were playing a bunch of no-name random people. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to give us a story in which you have the ability to play any race, any character that you want that's available at least. And you're going to have all these characters, and they're going to and you're going to be able to like do what you want with them. And to me, I think this is a really good idea, because there's lots of people who want desperately to play Turian. There's lots of other people who desperately want to play a bunch of these other characters. And I think that this is probably the best thing that they can do. And if they do this right, if they really do this right, then that's something that they're going to be able to give the players, that they're going to be able to pull that into multiplayer. And especially if that multiplayer has some kind of like online story component that's progressive over the years that you play, so it's sort of like Destiny and how it functions, then I think you'll have this connection to the world that people have been wanting for a really long time, and that's something that can maybe save it. If you create a new Commander Shepard scenario where you just have a singular Commander Shepard, and it's a singular race, like it's a human story, and you can't play as a Nasari, and you can't play as all these other things, it's just gonna fall flat a little bit. It's really gonna fall flat. So as far as what you said about them going really far ahead, like a couple hundred years into the future, um, that could work. That could work. Um, and there is a chance in most storylines, people ended up going with the Asari relationship, and I think what we can assume is that there's a good chance that if you, especially if you went ahead a couple hundred years, that there's the chance to actually play Commander Shepard's kid, Asari kid, that that's actually a real possibility because they live so long and technically, like, technically you're going ahead a couple hundred years, playing as her. That would be pretty interesting. That would that you'd have the ability to play with the story, right? After hundreds of years of change, and maybe they figured out how to rebuild the mass relays, and it's still kind of like a wild west of like them essentially like turning on like they're turning on these mass relays one by one by one, and they're reconnecting parts of the galaxy. um and all they've had before was basically like rough communication with these areas, but now that the mass relays have opened up, trade and the ability to like communicate, and all the ruins you can have with like the dead reapers everywhere, and the old kingdoms that fell apart and maybe have slowly rebuilt. That's really interesting. That could be a really interesting
That
world
could
to
be an
kind of
interesting part of the
build
gameplay
in.
loop, like
Hmm.
having to travel around and activate different things to open up different parts of the galaxy, and then you go there and find out what's going
Hmm.
on.
And maybe your main character is one that you design, and you can play any race and anything, and your main companion character is Commander Shepard's daughter, being an Asari girl. Um, Maybe that's the story, and you play with her. Either she's a love interest, or she's not, or whatever. Um, but that's pretty cool. I mean, she could play a universal love interest because and that might be something that you know that could really pull people in, get them invested in this multiplayer, and then have them like playing this multiplayer where it's not an MMO, but it's like it's something that you log on to. It's MMO light. It's like you're logging into, you're doing events and raids and stuff like that. Do they have the ability to pull this off? We will see when it comes to Dragon Age. Right now, we don't know where the studio's at. If I talk to friends at the studio, they say everything is fine. But they said that about the stupid Anthem before it launched. Oh yeah, this is the best game you'll ever play. Heard this from like 9 out of 10 people there. Oh yeah, super awesome game. And I was quite I going off of what they were saying and going off of what I knew they were working on as a general concept, 3 years beforehand, which is not the game that shipped at all, not even close. Storyline was completely different, setting was completely different, um, everything was different, and I was really annoyed that they said, "Oh yeah, it's gonna be great, it's gonna be the best game ever," and I've stopped talking to certain people because of the lies that they tried to shove down my throat because the game was terrible and they were sitting there going, "This is the best game you've ever played." So they were either drinking the Kool-Aid or they were repeating things that they knew were wrong because they had to. It's a
Right.
mess. It's an absolute mess.
I mean, I think you're right. We'll have to see how this next Dragon Age game turns out, and
Yeah.
that'll be
Once we,
a good
once
indicator
we
of,
see that,
yeah.
hmm
Because I mean,
it'll really tell us where they are as a studio. Have they recovered? Are they back to being good? Have they put in people into the proper positions to get this game out? Is it interesting? Does it actually have what they're looking for? Does it actually have the universe that they want, um, or not? And here's something that I hope. In a perfect world, this is the situation. Dragon Age drops and is pretty darn good. It's not great. It's not perfect. It's pretty darn good. You can tell that EA put its hand into the pie and tried to muddle things and they tweaked it, and they've made the best game that they could have with the constrictions that they have. But now they take that and they say, look, your meddling has been causing us nothing but problems. We are going to make the next Mass Effect game the way we want to make this game. And you're going to sit down and you're going to shut up, EA. I don't want you touching anything. So we're going to work on this the way that we think it needs to be worked on. And all of your what you show up and you tell us, hey, make sure you add this, man, don't add that. We're going to tell you to shove it. Okay? You almost killed our studio. You can come and look, and that's it. You're not getting the inside tour. You're not getting the ability to tell us what to do. We're gonna do our own thing. All of the ways that we wanted to add interesting concepts of working out quests and having this really, like, seriously, you read what they were doing with the previous iteration of Dragon Age 4, you will cry. The way that the way that they had the concept of being able to complete missions with any combination in any way, either um either in a way that was either like what they had is they had it so that you could complete any mission that you wanted, either through combat or through dialogue, through interesting ways of figuring out things. You could go in with a team of nothing but hardened mercenaries and blast through the whole area, or you could go in with nothing but a team of like I'm trying to remember this word. It's this fancy word for ladies of the night. But you go in with that and you basically like complete the mission by just but courtesans. Yeah. So you go in with these courtesans and they basically like flirt and kiss their way through. One of them's like a super spy and she manages to like grab stuff and then poof, you're all out of there. And it's like nobody they didn't know what hit them. Like anything between those two things, those are the extremes of the, yeah. So you're basically like, it's like Charlie's Angels to just good old fashioned like military shock and awe. It's like everything between those two things. Spies, you got people with money and influence doing this, like, and having this interactive AI system that built off of this concept. All of that was scrapped by EA, who said, no, no, we don't want any of this. People don't want this. They want multiplayer and loot boxes, and they want a monthly like Game Pass. You got to give us this. This is what you got to give us. And they scrapped most of what they had been working on for Dragon Age 4, and they went in and they started working on it. This is before Anthem dropped, and they started working on it the way that EA wanted them to work on it. And then Anthem dropped, and the whole studio went to shit, and basically everything went sideways. And they have since then walked away from that and said, all right, well, that was a horrible mistake. But how much of the new Dragon Age carries those scars of the Anthem bioware that we know? How much of that is going to show up? From what we can tell, a fair bit. I will be shocked if Dragon Age is an absolute stunner of a game. If it's one of the, if it's a contender for game of the year, I'll be shocked. Frankly, I will, because I can't trust a damn person at that company now. I can't trust the leadership. I can't trust the grunts. I can't trust anybody, because all of them stood there and watched Anthem drop and were like, yeah, yeah, no, this is good. This is good. The ones that didn't, the ones that were like, no, no, man, this is bad. This is bad. They're all gone. They all left. They're all working at other studios now. From Improbable to Archetype Entertainment. They're all gone. The only people that stayed were the Kool-Aid drinking like yes men. Sorry to be rude to at least somebody I know. but that's how it is. Now, have they recovered? Have they recovered? We don't know. And frankly, we won't know until we get a solid look at Dragon Age 4, which was, by the way, supposed to be was supposed to really hit the E3 this year really hard, but that is definitely not happening now. So yeah,
Indeed.
we don't know.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
we don't know where it's going now.
here's hoping.
Yeah.
Here's hoping they can recover the, what they once were, the spirit of what they once were, the reputation for making excellent story-driven RPG games. Be nice to get that back. So we'll see how it goes.
Would be.
I mean, a really good Mass Effect game would be very, very welcome, I think. All right. You are listening to the Augmented Reality Podcast. We love seeing the great conversation in the chat. If you want to keep the conversation going after the live broadcast, we welcome you to join our Discord community. You can find the link in the description below. It's a place where you can chat with us, chat with other Triple S community members, regular listeners and viewers about all the things we love to talk about. Stay up to date about everything we're doing here at the Triple S League and just hang out and have some fun. Lots of great conversations are going on there all the time. I was scrolling through it this morning and just laughing hysterically at some of the stuff that people are talking about in there. There's also some more serious conversations going on about real world events and things like that in a separate area. So yeah, you can find pretty much anything you want there. So click the link below to join and be sure to say hi to us in the welcome channel. So we're going to round out the day talking about Fallout 76. So the Wastelanders update is delayed again. It was supposed to come out last year.
It was supposed to come out the fall last year.
Yep.
Oh man, they're just so unlucky with this thing. And then they're like, okay, we've got it. We've got it's gonna be spring release. It's like, oh dear, yeah, it is not looking good for them.
Yeah. So anyway, they've pushed it back another week, only a week, from April 7th to April 14th now. So a few weeks. So that's just over 2 weeks away now. So I mean, if you're still interested in Fallout 76 and you've been looking forward to this, just a couple more weeks until you are able to check it out. And I mean, I don't know, you might have the time on your hands to check it out. But yeah, and the delay it's due to, as expected, real world events, the whole Plague Inc. LARPing situation. A lot of their personnel are working remotely. There's a variety of complications, and so they needed extra time to implement and test it and that kind of thing. So, Wastelanders, you looking forward to checking this outside? It's it's the patch that is, or it's like basically a full-fledged DLC that's going to be bringing NPCs to the game as well as a variety of other things that.
So there's a lot going on here with this patch. Do I believe everything I'm hearing? No. Unfortunately, with bioware in this current state, we really have to take it as it comes, not what they tell us. We have to see and get our hands on this product and test.
Bethesda, you mean?
Yeah, just everything with Bethesda right now. We just can't trust anything that they tell us off the top. We have to really take it in stride. This is a rebuild of a good chunk of the engine and the game in general. They have gone out of their way to add a whole bunch of features that have been really requested. They're adding this single player, the storyline. They're adding companions. They're adding people that are going to be at your camp. They have they've had some robots that can be at your camp now, but now they're going to have actual people that will maintain your camp and be at your camp. There's a whole bunch of other things that they're adding. Lots of requests. Apparently a lot of bug fixes. Apparently a lot of anti-hacker things. Again, do I believe this? No. Not a. If you were to ask me, like, you have to make a decision right now. Do you believe them or not? Pick which one. I'm like, of course I'm not going to believe them, but am I willing to give it a try? Probably willing to at least give it a try because they're saying that that this is all that they've learned and that they've incorporated this stuff and that this is the like we're gonna get this and then we're gonna get improvements to the private server thing and we're gonna get modding and all this kind of stuff. Do I want that to work? Do I want this to work? Yes, I really want this to work. Why? Because I want to be able to play a decent, non-buggy, non-hacker, exploitful Fallout game with our fans. This is what I've wanted ever since we heard that 76 was going to be a thing. This is something that we've been excited for ever since we heard that this was going to be a thing. I've said before a number of times. I just want the ability to have a server to turn off the damn store and to have a server for our players to play in from our community. More than 8 at a time.
Yeah.
These are capped off at 8 people is absolutely ludicrous. That's what I want. That's what I want, and I want it to be free to play. Um, with the server rentals, people can hate on them, they can bash them, they can say it was poor marketing, and all of that is true. But you do have to rent servers for Minecraft. There's no reason why you shouldn't necessarily be forced to rent servers from them. And actually $100 a year is pretty standard rate. So that is annoying, but it is just how the thing functions. And I want the private servers so that we can have a couple of perpetual servers turned on for our fans to play in and for our community to do stuff in and then I wanted to bring in some mods that are kind of cool that the community creates. I want to add them to the server and yeah, that's what I want. Will we get it? I don't think so. Right now, I'm kind of sitting here thinking probably not going to get it. This patch is probably going to be a little bit broken, but then again, we have to see. We really have to see. We know that they've changed a lot of things about the game. They've made your choices as far as your character points matter. I think it's only like a halfway thing. It's not a full fix, but it's good enough. It's good enough, I think. So, yeah.
So what other parts are you skeptical of with this? You're skeptical that we're going to get the private servers the way we want, but
Oh, we know that we're not going to get private servers the way we want in this patch. That's
right,
not coming
yeah.
in this patch. This is coming in hopefully by fall, because we're not gonna. I really doubt they're gonna have another massive patch for us or content update. We're probably not gonna have one until the fall at the very least. Probably not even then.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what other parts of it you said you don't believe them about everything they're promising here. So what else are you skeptical of?
Just the ability to pull this off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I really don't think that they. I don't know if the team is big enough or experienced enough to be able to pull this off. Their first couple of patches and content updates were kind of a joke. Like they had they had that whole so they had that whole content update with the whole darn it, I can't remember. One of their first DLC things was an absolute unmitigated disaster, and they were promising the moon then. I really at this point again. It's like any news that comes out about it, it's like it's probably gonna be a mess. So it's like they've found every possible conceivable way to make a mess out of everything. So I'm pretty sure they're just gonna do the same again. I'm really positive.
That's been the track record.
That's the track
I mean,
record.
yeah, like every time they released a patch for a while, it was breaking stuff and reverting other stuff, and everything was just a mess.
Yeah. So,
I mean, the game launched in a bad state, and then it just became a complete disaster. So yeah, like if they can fix it at this point, that would be great. We'll have to wait and see.
Yep. So that's where I stand with it. Do I want a good game that we can play with our community? Of course I do. I've wanted a multiplayer Fallout for a while now. Is this the multiplayer Fallout that I think we're getting? No. Like no. I really, really don't think so. I really, 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 really don't think that this is. No, 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 no.
That's too bad.
Yeah, but can it be an okay experience? If they do it right, which they haven't done so far, can they do it right? Maybe, maybe. It's like, yeah, maybe.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us then today. Unless you have any final words.
Let me know. Right now, Trials of Mana they have a free demo. The game launches on the 24th. This is a gamer like. It's like a gamer like. If you're an old gamer, if you used to play games back in the 90s, this is like one of these like holy grail story things, right? So let me just refresh everybody. So Trials of Mana came out in Japan in 1995 ish, and actually, I'm wondering if I messed up that date. I'm pretty sure I didn't, but yeah. So
90s anyway.
Yeah, 1995. Yeah, I for some reason I was thinking it was another date,
like Super Nintendo era.
Yeah. So this was put out by Square, or what Square was back then, which was a little bit different than what they are today. And it featured this story that kind of like was part of the Mana series, and there was a couple of those. But this one was promised to be ported to the West, which it never was until like last year sometime, or a year before. It there were fan translations and like fan like versions of the game that you could play, and it was again, it was really interesting because the 1995 version of the game was one of these like holy grails of like, I know people who learned Japanese so that they could play this game. It's that good, apparently. Now I did play I did play it back in like the early 2000s on the emulator. And I couldn't read what was going on, but I was interested. Like you could kind of like piece together some of the story, and it was really really good. The gameplay still one of the most amazing like gameplays ever. Now they have ported this over to a new thing. We talked about this a little bit on Saturday, or during the week on Wednesday, and what they've done to the game is quite interesting. So it's a completely like new world. It plays like the new Zelda game basically. You have this world, you can jump around, you can like move around, you can do kinds of stuff, but the story is the same. And the story is so much the same that they have the original voice acting, or the original, not the voice acting. They have the original like musical score that they've added to the game, and they have it in both Japanese and English with subtitles or not. And it looks really solid. A lot of the abilities are the same. They had a small tweak in some of the agility didn't work in the original game, was broken. And so anybody who was investing in agility based characters were just wasting their points. So from what it looks like, they've removed agility completely. just so that they can keep the combat essentially the same. And so now the combat is essentially the same. And I'm not kidding. I've looked at how it plays in the top-down Zelda-ish, like, looking thing. It kind of looks like Zelda 3 way back then. Or Zelda, maybe Zelda. Yeah, no, Zelda 3. Zelda 3 is probably the best example. And it kind of like, so that's how it used to play as. Now you go into it, it's almost exactly the same. Like the menus, the functions, the targeting of the spells, it's all so similar, even though these are two completely different games. One is a top-down isometric, um, Final Fantasy-ish type thing, and the other one is this 3D gorgeous environment, but it still plays the same.
Hmm.
And so it's really interesting. It's really got me like, okay, this is really interesting. The storylines, the storyline is still the same, and it's pretty brutal. Like there's some storylines that are really terrible, and it's like the Charlotte storyline is terrible. The Rises storyline is like you'll be face palming through it, but then the other storylines are like really gripping. The storyline of crap, I can't remember her name. Of the other girl, really gripping. Storyline of the thief, really, really gripping. And some of these storylines interact with each other. Some of them don't necessarily interact that much. There's a list of enemies in the game that, as you play through it, you pick 3 characters out of 6, and if you're picking those 3 character lines, you'll miss big parts of the world because you have no reason to go there because you don't have anybody that's involved in that particular storyline. Or you can take people that are like tied to a single storyline more closely. And so I think that's what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up playing the thief, the Valkyrie, and the wizard. The thief and the Valkyrie, their stories directly like interchange. Their stories are directly connected because as far as the events go, like spoiler for the intro storyline, but the main baddies in the one part of the world that attack the Valkyrie's home city, they attack her city, and then immediately preceding that, and they go back. That's where the thief storyline picks up at. And so they've attacked the city, they've killed all these Valkyries, and then they've returned from that, and the thief is like, what in the world's going on? Everything's like, why are they doing this? And everything's kind of crazy. And then he gets betrayed, and there's this huge betrayal moment, and then and so yeah, so that goes sideways. And so the storyline's very gripping. It's very interesting, and it's very well done. And then you have like these interesting interactions with the characters outside. Beautifully voice acted for the most part. I think Valkyrie is Reese's voice actress is still a little new. Her lines are pretty rough, but the most of the other characters are really, really, really well done. I think she's probably the worst character, and it's like it's only a little cringy from time to time. Most of the time, it's like she's great, but yeah, overall, really interesting. I'm really interested to see if this game has like the draw to it because it is essentially that old 1995 story and that old 1995 like gameplay. It's a good game, and I really want it to do well, but I don't know, if it's going to be worth it or not. So, yeah, I was thinking about streaming it here and then seeing what everybody's thoughts is. You could probably get like a good like 2.5-3 hours into it if you do everything with the characters that you want to. So yeah.
All right. Sounds good. And with that, we will wrap up the show for today. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Thank you for supporting this show by listening live or after the fact. Don't forget to slam that like button before you leave. And I want to extend a special thanks to our Patreon supporters and channel members who help make this content possible. Our big dang heroes on Patreon, Josh, Robin, and Timebean, and our 2 anonymous supporters there. Our channel members, Mr. Pazdernik, Jer Schultz, Game Notes, Night City Punk, and Terror K. If you're listening after the fact on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, or any of the other platforms that this podcast goes out to, we appreciate your interactions there as well. Don't forget that you can join the live show on Wednesdays and Saturdays on YouTube, where you can interact with us and other listeners and be a part of the discussion. See the Discord server for exact times and schedules, and click the link in the description to join the Discord server. We'd love to have you. The Augmented Reality Podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for the game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, and tons more quality gaming content. My name is Ash. On behalf of Cyb City, and thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you again very soon.